Bruce Pritchard came in, I think, later. But Vince has had the luxury of some tremendous people there. I mean, Kevin Dunn, who's been his executive producer, he was there, and his father was there before him. And there is nobody better in the business than him. Kerwin Silfies is the director, same thing. There's a guy named guy that came from NBC that wrote some of he did the Bret Hart takeoff on the Coke commercial, throwing the jersey to the kid, Dave Sahadi. A tremendously talented kid. So there was a lot of people there with a lot of talent. And, Vince he hired him, so I guess he's entitled to the credit for what they did. But because of Pat's leaving or being on hiatus, I had a lot of involvement with that at WrestleMania in Indianapolis. And I remember afterward going back in the car with Vince after the event, and Vince thanking me for what I had done and telling me how much respect he had for my contributions and my talent. And I still remember that. I appreciate that.
Was there a controversy on that show because Ric Flair bladed, or I'm not sure. I heard some story about that once.
All the years and that far back, to be honest with you, there may have been, but I don't remember.
Okay. Now, part of your job was negotiating contracts.
Yeah, but in those days, it was pretty much of a blanket contract.
Very
Vince offered you opportunity that said you were guaranteed 10 bookings a year at $50 a booking, and Vince was able to do that because of his track record of success of all the money that he paid guys. And guys were willing to accept a contract that basically guaranteed them little or nothing for the opportunity to go there, and those that performed were paid well. Plus, Vince was the first one to really get into marketing, merchandise, and so he had that very well organized that the guys made, the first action figure. So the guys made more money from that than they did wrestling. So he got a head start on that, and WCW or nobody else ever begin to get caught up to where he was. And that was an advantage that he had because it was a significant source of revenue for talent. But it was only right towards the end that Bischoff was down at WCW and they were offering guarantees, and so Vince had to make some tough decisions and offer some guarantees on some high-level talent that he had never done before. For example, say like Shawn Michaels. I think Shawn probably had some kind of a deal better than what he would have initially had when he went there.
So there weren't really, it was pretty much on your end, pretty cut and dry. You'd go to the wrestler and say, here's the contract, do you want it or do you not want it?
And what happened was they would come in and meet with Vince, a lot of times bring their wives, and there would be an interview process that usually I would sit in on. And then Vince would offer them an opportunity, and either they wanted to take advantage of it or they didn't. And most of them had waited all their lives for a chance to work for the WWF, so they readily agreed to it.
So most guys just took it as soon as it was offered, pretty much. Was there anybody in particular that comes to mind that tried to negotiate, or that just Vince didn't have any of it?
Some of them may, but I think, with Vince, there was no negotiating. It was like he was always dealing in a position of power because he had the operation that was really running well at that time, and guys were on a waiting list that wanted to come in there.
How did you get along with the Kliq of Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels?
I was there when Hunter came in, so I was part of the process when he was hired, and I thought we could make money with him. I thought he had talent. He was trained by Walter Kowalski, and as I said, I had my first match in the business with Walter, so I always had a kind of a warm spot and knew that anybody that Walter had trained certainly had instilled in them a respect for the business, and so I liked Hunter. there was probably more politics with Hall and Nash and Shawn Michaels, but again, I wasn't on the road every night and didn't see it so much. At the Garden, you might see it, or TV, you might see it. But
did you feel that they had too much power in the locker room, or they grew out of control?
I don't know that they grew out of control. I think, they were all successful. The one thing that I didn't sit well with me was when there was the scene in Madison Square Garden, which I guess when it was Scott Hall's last night, and they all went in on their own and did a curtain call. And again, it comes back to that old school, for lack of a better word, thing that's instilled in me of never breaking down that temporary suspension of disbelief. So to do that at the end of the night and go to a curtain call was basically saying everything that we worked so hard to do up to this point. It was like, yeah, and I didn't agree with that. And they didn't see the harm in it. I don't think they did it with malice. I know that Vince wasn't very happy.
How did Vince react to that whole thing? Or were you around when he found out about it or saw it? Or whatever?
I don't think a lot of times right at the end of the show, it would be, Vince too would be to try to get the crowd, get out of the building. And I don't think he found out actually until later, and somebody said, "Do you realize what they did?" And then he was bothered by it.
Okay. There were rumors going around that Triple H was the one who took all the punishment for that too. Do you think that's true?
I don't know. It could well be, because he was the one that stayed. At that point, he was the low man on the totem pole, and I'm sure Vince wasn't pleased. That's very possible that happened.
Now then you resigned in 1996, and you mentioned the pay cuts as one of the reasons. Was that the primary reason, or were there other factors involved too?
It was one of the reasons.
Yeah. But can you get into any of the other reasons?
It's Vince, that last year especially was rocking. Vince, Vince would, a lot of times would talk in the third person, and he would say, "What's the matter? You don't like Vince anymore, or you don't want to be around Vince?" And that wasn't the case. And I reached the point in life where I certainly had no financial independence and was not in a position to throw down the gauntlet with Vince. But I also, as I got older, and I'm in my 50s now, and I've turned 50, and I've got twins, and I've got an added responsibility, and I've got another baby on the way, and Shane got more involved. And as Shane came around, Vince was Shane's role model, and Vince idolized his father, and whatever Vince did, a lot of times it became a competition between the two of them. I've done things in my life, like I said, I've jumped out of airplanes, I've done silly things, but when my children came along, I looked at things differently in life. And where at one time after a TV, I would think nothing of jumping in a car and have somebody get behind the wheel and turn the key and hit the floor and drive 100 miles an hour. Cop pull him over, get him a ticket, and then the cop turns around, boom, same thing. And all of a sudden it's like, we ever wrapped around a pole, my wife's sitting home with those two kids and another one on the way, and things that didn't bother me before did bother me. And so I made the conscientious effort to not want to be in that car. I didn't need to go out with Vince at 4 o'clock in the morning and watch him eat a dozen egg whites scrambled with something and be part of his entourage. I mean, because it was exhausting working TV. So I chose to go with Howard Finkel, and was ridiculed somewhat for that. Oh, you'd rather be with Howard than be with Vince. And when Vince asked me, I told him, I said, Vince, I don't want to take those risks anymore. It's not funny to me. It's not something I want to do. I worry about what might happen and the responsibility I have to those little kids sitting at home.
Is it true you walked out without any notice?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say your bridge is burned there?
Probably. I mean, I walked into Vince and I said, when you cut my salary after you helped get me in, insisted that I have my roots here, that I own a home here, I made those decisions in part based on conversations that we had and of what the future held for me. And I started my family. I have no less passion for the business than I ever had. Nothing is different, but you see me different, and I can't control that. And I thought Vince showed me no respect personally and professionally, and as a result of it, I lost that same respect for him. And it just reached a point where I had to get out from under my home up there and the mortgage in order to be able to do anything. And it took me a year and a half to sell my home. And the day I closed on the home is the day that I walked in and waited for the opportunity. And I said, Vince, I'm going to see you. I'm going to do his office. And I said, you hired me yourself. And I said, and so the day that I don't want to work here anymore, I personally feel that I owe it to you to tell you face to face. And if it's something that you want to discuss and even care about, I'm happy to sit down and do it with you. And if not, if it doesn't matter to you, that's fine too. But I said, here's my letter of resignation. I gave it to him. And we went into his office and talked for about an hour.
Did you know that you were going to WCW at that point, or you just left without knowing what you were going to do?
My wife and I had a little bit of money out of the house. We had to take a loss to get out from under it. Had a little bit of money left over. I had no job, but I couldn't work for him another day.
Yeah.
And we got out a map and said, where are we going to go? I looked at Nashville because I knew Jerry Jarrett, but there really wasn't anything there at the moment. Looked at Florida, Tampa, Orlando, figuring, possible job opportunities, weather, all the things. And then looked at Atlanta, and I thought, I know nothing about WCW. Logic would tell me, because I didn't burn any bridges there when I left, other than I had some heated exchange with Jim Hurd because he didn't want to pay me for my last appearance, and he was mad because the Clash of Champions got screwed up after I left. And anyway, I got paid because Vince got a lawyer to write a letter for me, and Hurd had been long gone. And I thought, I've got 20-some years, 25 years experience in the business. I've worked up here at the executive level. I'm such a wealth of knowledge. I would think somebody's going to. Did I have a job or had I talked to him?
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.